Senior Council member Vextol's 3 hearts skipped simultaneously when the emergency channel burst to life, shattering the serene quiet of the Galactic Council's central chamber. The sound that emerged wasn't the usual dignified requests for aid or diplomatic assistance. It was pure terror, transmitted across 17 quantum bands simultaneously. "This is Colonial Administrator Ixel of the Zenobian Outer Worlds. We are experiencing catastrophic failures in all atmospheric processors. 12 colonies affected. Millions at risk. Please, the storms. They're breaking through." Static consumed the transmission for 3 agonizing seconds. "Cannot maintain stable environment. The ion storm is preventing emergency protocols. We need immediate." The transmission cut off. In the resulting silence, Vextol could hear the subtle vibration of his fellow council members' stress membranes. He activated his station's holoprojector, bringing up the status of the Zenobian colonies. The data made his outer skin pale to a sickly white. "By the first stars," Sub-Councillor Mirix whispered, her crystalline form dimming in distress. "They're in the heart of the Crimson Maelstrom." The Crimson Maelstrom, even its name struck fear into the most seasoned space travelers. A permanent ion storm that consumed an entire sector, its crimson tendrils of electromagnetic fury could shred most ship shields in minutes. Even the Council's most advanced vessels avoided its edges. "Launch the emergency response fleet," Vextol ordered, his appendages moving across his console with practiced efficiency. The Council's elite rescue armada, equipped with the finest shield technology in known space, emerged from their docking bays like a swarm of gleaming insects. They didn't even make it halfway to the Maelstrom's outer boundary. The Council chamber's main display showed the disaster in brutal clarity. 3 of their most advanced ships simply came apart, their atomic bonds unable to resist the storm's fury. The rest retreated, their crews barely alive, their shields reduced to scattered particles. "It's impossible," Senior Engineer Kix announced, her mechanical interfaces whirring in distress. "The storm has intensified beyond all previous records. Standard biology cannot survive those conditions. Even our most advanced environmental systems are failing to compensate." That's when Junior Council member Teldar, newly appointed and still learning proper council protocol, spoke up. "What about the humans?" The chamber fell silent. Even the ambient atmospheric processors seemed to quiet. "The Deathworlders." Vextol's tone carried equal measures of horror and hope. "They're barely past their first contact century. Their ships are practically primitive by our standards." "Exactly," Teldar continued, gaining confidence. "They don't rely on shield technology like we do. Their vessels are built like their ocean submersibles, crude but durable. And their biology." He activated a secondary display, showing Earth's environmental data. "They evolved on a world that would kill most species. Extreme pressure variations, toxic atmospheres, radiation exposure. They deal with these conditions as a matter of course." The chamber erupted in overlapping conversations. Vextol raised his primary appendage for silence, then accessed the human delegation's contact protocols. The response came faster than anyone expected, and it wasn't what they anticipated. The human ambassador's face filled the main screen, but he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a figure in what the Council recognized as a military uniform, already speaking into a communication device. "Council member Vextol," the ambassador began, "we're already mobilizing the 7th Survival Fleet. Commander Stone has personal experience with similar conditions from the Pacific megastorm crisis." "The entire fleet?" Mirix's crystalline form flickered in shock. "We expected perhaps a small special operations team." The military officer, Commander Stone, stepped forward. His expression carried none of the fear the Council expected. Instead, he smiled, and somehow that was more terrifying than any display of concern would have been. "With respect, Council member," Stone said, "when you're raised on a death world, You learn to bring enough force to get the job done. The 7th Fleet is already prepped for storm conditions. We can launch in 20 minutes. As the transmission ended, Vextol noticed Teldar studying Earth's atmospheric data more closely. The junior member's expression shifted from concern to astonishment. Council members, Teldar announced, according to these readings, the conditions in the Crimson Maelstrom, they're actually milder than some of Earth's natural storms. The council chamber fell silent once again, but this time the silence carried something new. Hope. The Deathworlders were coming. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what they needed. Commander Jack Stone stood on the bridge of the TSS Thunderchild, watching his fleet form up through the reinforced viewports. 800 ships, each one built to laugh in the face of nature's worst tantrums. The Council's observers had called them primitive. Looking at the sleek alien vessels docked nearby, he understood why. Where alien ships gleamed with polished alloys and shimmed with energy shields, the 7th Fleet looked like it had been built by angry dwarves. Double-layered titanium hulls, emergency backup systems for the backup systems, and enough structural reinforcement to survive a direct hit from a small asteroid. They weren't pretty, but they were tough. Council Observation Team is requesting permission to board. Sir, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported from her communication station. They seem concerned about our lack of shield generator arrays. Stone smiled, the same smile that had unnerved the council during their briefing. Grant them access. Let's show our new friends how Deathworlders do search and rescue. The observation team, 3 aliens representing the council's emergency response division, entered the bridge like they were walking into a museum of antiquated technology. Their environmental suits, necessary for their survival in Earth-normal conditions, gleamed with the same sophisticated tech as their ships. Commander Stone, the lead observer, a tall, crystalline being named Mirix, began. We must express our concerns about your approach. Our calculations suggest your vessels won't survive first contact with the Maelstrom's outer edge. Stone gestured to the main tactical display. Those calculations assume we're going to fight the storm. He traced a route through the swirling chaos displayed in the hologram. We're not. We're going to dive right into its heart. The second observer, a being of living metal named Kix, made a sound like grinding gears. That's suicide. The energy densities alone are about 60% of what we dealt with during the Pacific megastorm. Stone interrupted. Rodriguez, show them the footage. The tactical display shifted to historical recordings from Earth. Massive super hurricanes merged into a continent-spanning monster of a storm. Ships, older versions of their current vessels, punching through waves taller than skyscrapers. Rescue teams working in conditions that would strip flesh from bone. That storm system spawned F6 tornadoes, Stone explained. Created pressure differentials that could implode standard ships. Generated enough electrical activity to power a small country. We lost 3 cities before we learned to fight back. He turned to face the observers directly. Everything on this ship, every member of this crew, was forged in conditions just like that. The Maelstrom, it's just another storm. The third observer, a gelatinous entity named Frel, rippled in what might have been disbelief. Your species deliberately enters such conditions. For training. For survival, Stone corrected. Earth doesn't give us much choice. So we adapted. The fleet's deployment alarm sounded, a deep, resonating tone that vibrated through the hull. Stone watched his ships move into formation with practiced precision. The council observers stared as 800 primitive vessels arranged themselves into a pattern their sensors initially dismissed as chaotic. That's not a standard attack formation, Mirix noted. It's not an attack formation at all, Stone replied. It's based on how schools of fish move through ocean currents. Each ship creates a slipstream for the others to follow. We're not fighting the storm. We're going to swim through it. The Thunderchild's engines rumbled to life, a deep thrumming that spoke of raw power held in check. Across the fleet, other ships followed suit. To the observer's obvious shock, the human crew seemed excited, almost eager. "All ships report ready," Commander Rodriguez announced. "Engineering reports, all systems nominal. Storm parameters downloaded to all vessels." Stone took his command position, noting with some amusement how the observers gripped their support rails. "Send to all ships. Operation Raindance is go. Standard storm breaking formation. Remember your training. This is just like home, just a bit quieter." As the fleet began to move, Mirix made one final observation. "Your crew, they're smiling." "Of course they are," Stone replied, watching the Maelstrom's crimson tendrils reach out like welcoming arms. "This is what we do best. When the universe says something's impossible, humans take it as a challenge." The Thunderchild surged forward, leading her fleet into the heart of the storm. Behind them, the Council observation team was about to learn why Earth's children never learned to fear the impossible. The Crimson Maelstrom's outer edge loomed before the fleet like a wall of angry gods. Lightning the size of continents crawled across its surface, and waves of ionic energy made the void itself shudder. The Council observers watched in rigid silence as the remains of their previous rescue attempt drifted past, twisted hulls of ships that had once been the pride of their civilization. "Stormfront analysis complete," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, her fingers dancing across her hardened console. "Primary wave height measuring at 8.2 on the stellar scale. Electromagnetic density at 93% of Pacific megastorm levels." Commander Stone nodded, his expression shifting into what his crew recognized as his storm hunter face. "Perfect surfing weather. All ships, execute breakthrough pattern Delta, just like we practiced." The observers watched in horror as the human fleet did something unprecedented. They turned their ships sideways to the storm front. "You're exposing your maximum surface area to the energy wave," Kix exclaimed, her metallic form vibrating with alarm. "The structural stress will tear your ships apart." Stone's reply was cut off as the first wave hit. The Thunderchild rolled with the impact, riding the energy like a surfboard on a tsunami. The observers stumbled, but the human crew moved with the motion as if they'd been born to it. Across the fleet, 800 ships performed the same maneuver in perfect synchronization. "That's the thing about storms," Stone explained, adjusting their angle slightly as another wave approached. "They're not just obstacles, they're power sources. You just need to know how to ride them." The tactical display showed the fleet's pattern evolving, ships moving in fluid formations that seemed to make no sense until you looked at the energy flow patterns. Each vessel created eddies in the storm's current, disruptions that the ships behind them used to conserve power and maintain stability. "Entering secondary layer," Rodriguez announced. "Electromagnetic density increasing. Hull temperature rising, but within tolerances." The Thunderchild shuddered as a particularly massive energy wave struck. Warning lights flashed across several stations, but the crew's response was eerily calm. They'd trained for this, lived for this. Council vessels reported total shield failure at this depth, Mirix observed, her crystalline form dimming with concern. "Yet your ships show no signs of critical stress." "Shields are fine for direct impacts," Stone replied, ordering a slight adjustment to their formation. "But in a storm, you need to work with the energy, not against it. Every ship in this fleet is built like a deep-sea submarine, designed to flex and bend, rather than resist." A massive bolt of stellar lightning split the void ahead of them. Before the observers could react, Stone barked out, "All ships, diving pattern. Ride the aftershock." The fleet plunged downward relative to the energy plane, and something extraordinary happened. The electromagnetic backwash from the lightning strike created a temporary corridor of relatively calm space. The human ships shot through it like surfers catching the perfect wave. "Beautiful," Stone murmured. "Rodriguez, signal the fleet to maintain this pattern. The storm's doing half our work for us." The observers huddled near their monitoring station, their instruments recording everything. They watched as the human ships deliberately positioned themselves to catch energy waves, using the storm's own power to propel them deeper into its heart. "Your crew," Vrel noted, their gelatinous form rippling with what might have been admiration. "They're not just surviving this. They're dancing with it." "Humans have a saying," Rodriguez offered from her station, barely looking up as she coordinated another formation shift. "If you can't beat nature, learn to move with her." The tactical display updated, showing their position relative to the Zenobian colonies. They'd covered more distance in 2 hours than the Council ships had managed in 2 days, and they were still accelerating. "Storm intensity approaching maximum," Rodriguez reported, entering the core zone. Stone smiled that predator smile again. "Time to show the galaxy why Earth's children never learn to fear the storm. All ships, prepare for maximum turbulence. Let's go save some lives." The Thunderchild led her fleet deeper into the Maelstrom's heart, where no ships had survived before. But then again, no ships had ever been crewed by Deathworlders who called storms like this home. The Zenobian colony of New Hope emerged from the storm like a nightmare made real. The Thunderchild's sensors cut through the chaos, revealing a scene that made even the seasoned human crew pause. The massive atmospheric processors, once gleaming towers of alien engineering, now leaked streams of corrupted gases into the already turbulent environment. "Life sign reading are complicated," Rodriguez reported, frowning at her displays. "The colonial shelter's shielding is degrading. I'm detecting multiple Xenobian signatures, but they're weak." Stone studied the tactical overlay, his expression darkening. "Those aren't normal atmospheric patterns. The processor isn't just failing. It's creating something new." The Council observers huddled around their own instruments, their horror palpable. "Impossible," Kix whispered. "The chemical reaction shouldn't." "Priority alert." Rodriguez's voice cut through the bridge. "Reading massive toxic formation in the lower atmosphere. Chemical composition matches. Sir, it's almost identical to the Pacific megastorm's acid bands." Stone's head snapped up. "Show me." The main display shifted, revealing layers of colored gases swirling beneath the colony's main platforms. What should have been a controlled environmental system had become a deadly cocktail of chemicals, each layer more lethal than the last. "First colony report coming through," Rodriguez announced, patching it to main speakers. A desperate voice filled the bridge. "To any rescue vessels, our main shelter's environmental systems are failing. The processor malfunction has created some kind of caustic storm system. Our suits can't handle the toxicity levels. We have 300 colonists here, including 70 children in the lower recreation center. The toxic layer is rising." Static interrupted before the voice returned. "Please, the children are trapped below the main chemical band." The observers turned to Stone, expecting to see defeat. Instead, they found him grinning. "Rodriguez, signal the fleet. Initiate emergency protocol Thunderdome. All ships with deep dive modification are to form a perimeter around the colony. Atmospheric processing ships to the front." "Sir," Rodriguez replied, already sending the orders. "The toxic density in that storm layer is about 80% of what we dealt with in the Indonesian acid event." Stone finished. "We've trained for this." Lieutenant Chan, a young officer at the environmental controls, straightened. "Sir, break out the thundersuits. Full acid storm configuration. I want every deep dive team ready for deployment in 10 minutes." The observers watched in stunned silence as the bridge erupted into controlled chaos. Crew members moved with practiced precision, unsealing specialized compartments and donning what looked like incredibly primitive environmental gear. "Those are not standard environmental suits," Merrick's noted, studying the thick, layered material. "Because they're not environmental suits," Stone replied, checking the seals on his own gear. "They're modified deep-sea diving suits, designed for volcanic vents and chemical spills. We call them thundersuits because they can take a lightning strike and keep going. But the toxicity levels, Vrel's gelatinous form rippled with concern, are nothing compared to what these suits handled during the Chennai chemical crisis. Stone cut in. Human skin is already resistant to most acids. These suits just give us an edge. The fleet moved into position, their formation creating a physical barrier against the worst of the storm. Stone watched as the first teams began their deployment, dropping from their ships in suits that looked more suited to ancient deep-sea exploration than space rescue. "Sir," Rodriguez called out, reading critical pressure changes in the lower levels. "The chemical layer is accelerating." Stone sealed his helmet, checking the oxygen mix. Time to show these folks why Deathworlders make the best rescue workers. All teams, prepare for drop. Remember your training. This is just like the Pacific Shelf dives, just with better visibility. As he moved toward the deployment bay, Mirix called after him. "Commander, our calculations show this is beyond even human survival parameters." Stone paused at the door, his suited form somehow more imposing than ever. "That's the thing about humans, council member. We've never been very good at understanding the word impossible, especially not when there are kids involved." The last thing the observers saw before he left was that Predator's smile through his faceplate. Beyond the Thunderchild's viewports, dozens of suited figures were already descending into the chemical storm, moving with the confidence of a species that had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. The rescue had begun, and hell itself was about to learn why you don't stand between humans and those who need their help. The Thundersuit's external sensors screamed warnings as Commander Stone led his team through the chemical storm. Visibility was near zero, the toxic soup around them illuminated only by the suit's emergency lights and the occasional flash of lightning from above. Each step through the caustic atmosphere felt like walking through molasses. "Status check," Stone commanded through the suit's comm system. 20 voices responded in sequence, each one steady despite the hell surrounding them. "Sir," Lieutenant Chan's voice cut through the check-in. "I'm reading multiple structural failures in the lower recreation center's outer shell. That acid fog is eating through their basic containment." Stone's mind raced through options, discarding conventional solutions as quickly as they came. The Zenobian children were trapped 3 levels down, behind failing barriers, with toxic gas rising from below. Standard protocols wouldn't cut it. "Time to go old school," Stone announced. "Rodriguez, get me a fleet-wide channel." When the channel opened, his orders made the council observers on the Thunderchild's bridge physically recoil. "All ships with reinforced hulls, move to these coordinates. We're going to build a wall." Stone transmitted a series of positions. "Those kids need a corridor. We're going to give them one. The old-fashioned way." What followed would be written about in council texts for centuries. Human ships, those primitive vessels the council had dismissed, deliberately positioned themselves in the toxic storm. Using their reinforced hulls as physical barriers, they created a makeshift corridor through the chemical hell. "That's not possible," Kix whispered on the bridge. "The structural stress alone." "Watch and learn," Rodriguez replied, coordinating the fleet's movements. "This is how we handled the Hudson River chemical spill. Sometimes, the best solution is the simplest one." Down in the storm, Stone's team reached the recreation center's outer doors. The Zenobian construction was already failing, its advanced materials no match for the concentrated acid fog. But the human team didn't hesitate. "Chan, deploy the neutralizer bombs," Stone ordered, "just like we used in the Chennai incident." Small canisters flew from the rescue team's suits, exploding in carefully calculated patterns. Where they burst, the acid fog temporarily cleared, creating pockets of relatively safe air. It was crude, effective, and completely unexpected. "Sir," a voice called through the comm. "I've got contact with the internal shelter. 73 children, 15 adult supervisors. Their inner barrier is down to 30%. Stone reached the main door, his suit's external sensors showing the metal was barely holding together. Time for some human innovation. Breach teams, front and center. We're going to show these folks how Earth's demolition experts do search and rescue. What happened next stunned the watching council observers. The human teams didn't try to bypass the failing security systems or hack the door controls. Instead, they attached what looked like primitive explosive charges around the door's frame. You're using explosives. In this environment, Mirix's voice carried pure shock through the command channel. Shaked charges, Stone corrected, as his team set the final detonator. Designed for underwater oil rig emergencies, sometimes you need to be direct. The charges blew with surgical precision, creating a clean opening while simultaneously superheating and neutralizing the surrounding acid fog. Through the gap, Stone could finally see the trapped Zenobians. The children's environmental suits were failing, their advanced materials dissolving in the caustic atmosphere. No time for fancy solutions, Stone announced. We're carrying them out. The old way. One by one, human rescuers moved into the chamber. Their thundersuits, designed to withstand Earth's deep-sea volcanic vents, held steady as they physically lifted Zenobian children and adults. Where alien technology failed, human endurance and determination stepped in. I don't understand, one of the Zenobian supervisors said as Stone lifted 2 children in his arms. Your technology is so basic. That's because it's not about the technology, Stone replied, starting the trek back through their makeshift corridor. It's about not giving up. On Earth, we learned that lesson the hard way. Above them, the fleet of human ships held their position, their hulls groaning under the chemical assault but refusing to yield. Inside the Thunderchild, the council observers watched in stunned silence as human after human emerged from the toxic storm carrying alien children to safety. They're not just surviving, Vrel observed, their gelatinous form rippling with something like awe. They're thriving in conditions that should kill them. Rodriguez smiled from her station, coordinating another group of rescue ships. That's the thing about humans. The worse things get, the more we show what we're really made of. And in the heart of the chemical storm, Stone carried another child to safety, his thundersuit's systems screaming warnings he completely ignored. After all, compared to an average Tuesday on Earth, this was just another day at the office. Commander, you need to see this. Lieutenant Chan's voice crackled through the thundersuit's comm system as Stone supervised the last evacuees being loaded onto the rescue ships. The lieutenant's tone made him pause. It wasn't just urgency, but contained something darker. Talk to me, Chan. Sir, I was running standard post-rescue diagnostics on the processor's core systems when I found something wrong. These weren't random failures. The system was sabotage. The word hung in the toxic air like a physical presence. Stone felt his jaw tighten as Chan continued, sending data streams to his suit's display. The chemical reactions, the timing of the failures, the communication blackouts. None of it was natural. Someone programmed this. They wanted these colonies to die. On the Thunderchild's bridge, the council observers crowded around the data feeds. Mirix's crystalline form darkened with horror. This is impossible. The security protocols were bypassed by someone who knew them intimately. Rodriguez finished, her fingers flying across her console. Sir, I'm seeing similar patterns at all 12 colonies. This wasn't just an attack. It was an extinction attempt. The ion storm chose that moment to intensify, sending waves of electromagnetic energy hammering against the fleet's hulls. Warning klaxons blared across multiple ships as the storm reached levels that even their reinforced structures struggled to handle. All ships report critical stress on external plating, Rodriguez announced. The storm's getting worse. Even our hulls can't take much more of this. The council observers turned to Stone, expecting him to call a retreat. Instead, they found him studying the tactical display with an intensity that made them step back. How many colonies have we evacuated? He asked, his voice deadly calm. 7 completed, sir. 5 still waiting. And the sabotage pattern? Consistent across all locations, Chan replied. Whoever did this is still out there, and based on these energy readings, they're monitoring the situation. Stone stood silent for a long moment, watching the storm rage outside the viewports. The Zenobian refugees they'd rescued huddled in the ship's emergency shelter, their children still shaking from their brush with death. 5 more colonies waited for rescue. Somewhere out there, the architects of this atrocity watched, probably confident that the storm would finish their work. Sir, Rodriguez said softly, the Zenobian support ships are pulling back. They're saying the storm's reached unsurvivable levels. Stone's response was not what anyone expected. He laughed. Unsurvivable. He turned to face the council observers. Tell me something. What do you think happens on Earth when we discover a serial killer is operating during a Category 6 hurricane? The observers exchanged confused glances. Finally, Kix spoke. Surely you wait for the storm to pass. No. Stone's smile was all edges. We hunt them down. Rodriguez, signal the fleet. We're initiating split protocol echo. The bridge crew straightened in their seats. They knew this order. It had been created during the Pacific megastorm crisis, when they'd had to simultaneously evacuate cities and stop the eco-terrorists who'd triggered the disaster. Half the fleet continues evacuation operations, Stone announced. The other half, we're going hunting. Chen, can you track these energy signatures? Already on it, sir. They're using the storm for cover, but they forgot something. We're used to tracking submarines through hurricane waters. Same principle. Sir, Merrick's interjected. This storm is beyond even your fleet's tolerances. Pursuing both objectives would be the right thing to do. Stone cut in. Lieutenant Rodriguez, send to all ships. Operation Thunder Split is go. Rescue teams maintain course to remaining colonies. Hunter group form up on my position. He turned to his crew, and his expression made the observers understand why humans were classified as predators. They thought this storm would hide their crime. Stone said quietly, time to show them why Earth's children learn to hunt in any weather. Rodriguez, you have the bridge. Keep our guests safe. As Stone moved toward the deployment bay, Vrel called after him. Your ships are already at their limits. This course of action is necessary, Stone finished, because there's something these saboteurs need to learn. When you try to murder children in front of humans, the storm becomes the least of your problems. The Thunder Child's hull groaned as another wave of energy washed over them. But as the fleet split into its new formation, the council observers noticed something extraordinary. Every human crew member was smiling. They'd found their prey, and not even hell itself would stop the hunt. The hunter group moved through the storm like shadows, their running lights dimmed to near darkness. Commander Stone stood on the bridge of the Thunder Child, watching the tactical display as his ships executed a hunting pattern perfected in Earth's deepest oceans. The storm raged around them, but now they used its fury for cover. Contact, Lieutenant Chan whispered, treating the command channel like a hunter's blind. Energy signature matches the sabotage pattern. Bearing 27 Mark IV, deep in the storm's secondary layer. Stone studied the readings. The saboteurs had hidden their ship in a pocket of intense electromagnetic activity, thinking the interference would mask their presence. They didn't realize they were dealing with predators who had learned to hunt in Earth's hurricane seasons. They're using the storm's electromagnetic field like camouflage, Chan continued, her fingers dancing across specialized sensors. But they're leaving ripples, just like a submarine under the waves. Stone smiled. And what do we do with submarines, Lieutenant? We make them surface, sir. The Thunder Child's hunter group spread out in a pattern that would have looked chaotic to outside observers. But to humans who had chased pirates through typhoons and tracked smugglers through monsoons, it was a perfectly choreographed dance of predator and prey. All ships, Execute depth charge pattern Delta. Stone ordered. Let's remind these folks why you don't hide from Deathworlders in a storm. Modified probes launched from the human ships, diving into the electromagnetic soup. As they detonated, they created rippling waves of destruction in the storm's natural patterns. To the hidden saboteurs, it must have looked like random chaos. To the humans, it was a carefully calculated net, drawing closed with deadly precision. They're moving, Chan announced. Bearing changed to 3-1 Mark II. They're trying to dive deeper into the storm. Stone's grin turned predatory, trying to use the dense energy layers for cover. Typical prey behavior. All ships, initiate pursuit pattern Echo. Remember your training. This is just like chasing smugglers through the Bangladesh cyclone. The human fleet moved with shocking speed, their ships rolling with the storm's energy rather than fighting it. Where their quarry tried to hide in the worst of the turbulence, the humans charged straight through it, using maneuvers that made the Council observers on the Thunderchild's bridge clutch their support rails in terror. That's insane. Kix exclaimed as a human ship deliberately rode a massive energy wave sideways. They'll tear themselves apart. No, Rodriguez replied from her station, coordinating the fleet's movements. They're surfing the storm, just like we did during the Mumbai monsoon crisis. Sometimes, the best way to catch your prey is to ride the very forces they're hiding from. The saboteur's ship finally appeared on visual sensors, a sleek vessel designed for stealth. Its crew had probably thought themselves safe in conditions that would destroy most pursuit vessels. They hadn't counted on being hunted by a species that treated such conditions as a tactical advantage. They're attempting to access a jump point, Chan reported, trying to use the storm's interference to mask their exit vector. Stone's response was immediate. Execute maneuver Thunderstrike. Show them why Earth's navies learned to fight in hurricanes. What followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. The human ships moved in perfect coordination, using the storm's own energy to amplify their movements. Where the saboteurs tried to slip through gaps in the tempest, they found human vessels emerging from the chaos like sharks through waves. Target vessel is boxed in, Chan announced with satisfaction. They're trapped between our fleet and a level 10 energy front. Stone opened a channel to the cornered ship. His voice carried the calm certainty of an apex predator. This is Commander Stone of the human 7th Fleet. You're trapped in a storm that we call mild. You've got two choices: surrender now, or learn firsthand why Earth's children are called Deathworlders. The response was immediate. The saboteur's ship powered down its engines. On the Thunderchild's bridge, the Council observers watched in stunned silence as human boarding teams prepared for action, checking their thundersuits with the casual ease of predators readying for a final pounce. I don't understand, Mirix said softly. How can you function so effectively in these conditions? Rodriguez smiled as she coordinated the boarding operation. Because this? She gestured at the raging storm outside. This is what we call perfect hunting weather, and they just learned the hard way. Never try to hide from Deathworlders in their natural habitat. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council fell silent as Commander Stone stepped onto the speaking platform. Behind him, the massive displays showed the final statistics. 12 colonies saved, over 40,000 lives preserved, and 1 terrorist cell captured, all in conditions that the Council had deemed unsurvivable. The prisoners have confessed, Stone began, his voice carrying easily through the vast space. They chose the storm as their weapon because their simulation showed no known species could survive a rescue attempt. They thought the deaths would look natural. Senior Council member Vextal leaned forward. And yet your fleet not only survived but thrived in those conditions. How is this possible? Stone's smile carried echoes of the predator who had hunted through the storm. Because what they saw as unsurvivable, we call Tuesday. He gestured to the display showing Earth's weather patterns. The Crimson Maelstrom, It's roughly equivalent to our Category 4 hurricanes. We get those every year. The chamber erupted in murmurs as Stone continued. The toxic storms, their sabotage created. Similar to what we deal with during volcanic events. The pressure differentials, less than what our deep-sea workers handle daily. Lieutenant Rodriguez, standing at attention behind her commander, activated a new display. It showed the Thunder Child's fleet in action. Ships surfing energy waves, teams working in toxic atmospheres, humans carrying alien children through conditions that should have killed them. You see advanced technology as the solution to environmental challenges, Stone explained. We learned a different lesson on Earth. We learned to adapt, to become something that could not only survive, but hunt in any environment. The Zenobian ambassador rose, her elegant form trembling with emotion. My people owe you a debt we can never repay. But I must ask, why did your teams risk so much? The storm, the toxins, the hunt. You could have waited. No, Stone replied softly. We couldn't, because that's not who we are. He paused, choosing his words carefully. On Earth, when disaster strikes, we don't wait for perfect conditions. We don't hide until it's safe. We go in. We fight. We save who we can. The display changed again, showing human history. Rescuers charging into burning buildings, ships battling monster waves to save stranded vessels, teams working through hurricanes and earthquakes. This is our legacy, Stone continued. Not our technology, not our ships, but our refusal to accept that something is impossible just because it's hard. We come from a world that tries to kill us every day, and it taught us something valuable. There's no such thing as unsurvivable conditions. There are only people who haven't found a way through them yet. The chamber was silent as the final images played. Human ships escorting Zenobian refugee vessels to safety, teams distributing emergency supplies, children being reunited with their families. The saboteurs made a critical mistake, Stone concluded. They thought the storm would be their ally. But they never considered that somewhere out there was a species that evolved on a world where such storms are common. They never thought that the very conditions they chose as their weapon would be what we consider perfect hunting weather. The Council's vote was unanimous. Humanity would be granted full access to galactic emergency response protocols, with a special focus on extreme environment operations. The Zenobian government requested permanent human advisory teams for their colonial operations. As Stone left the chamber, junior council member Teldar caught up with him. Commander, one last question. When you split your fleet, when you chose to both rescue and hunt, how did you know you could succeed? Stone stopped, looking back at the images still playing on the displays. Because that's what humans do. We don't choose between saving lives and finding justice. We find a way to do both. After all, his smile returned, the same one that had unnerved the council during their first meeting. We're Deathworlders. The impossible is our specialty. In the years that followed, the galaxy would learn a new truth. When disaster strikes, when conditions are impossible, when hope seems lost, call the Deathworlders. Because sometimes the most advanced solution is a species that never learned to accept defeat, a people forged in the fires of a world that made them strong enough to face any challenge. After all, to the children of Earth, the impossible is just another Tuesday.